Hello, Loki Legion. Today, when I woke up this morning, when I checked Adam Schefter's Twitter, I saw that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers literally fired almost just about every one of their offensive staff, their offensive coordinator, and a bunch of their quality control coaches, all that stuff. And that was crazy because I remember I was being pretty pessimistic in my Tampa Bay section in my last podcast. But anyways, kind of moving on from that, I got a new intro, so I'm very excited to show you guys. So let's hit it.
Three. He throws to the end zone. Davis 4-3 in the win. Oh, it's good. Crosby in on goal. Backhander. He scores. And good. 49ers win it.
All right, so I'm doing a little bit of a different kind of episode today just because I didn't want to do a 1-minute video today, but also didn't want to do a full-length podcast that's going to be coming out tomorrow. So I decided to do, why not try out tier list making for the first time on this channel, just because I see a lot of other people do it and it seems pretty fun, and I think it's the best way to kind of organize how I want to do the Sean Payton sweepstakes, on my thoughts on it at least. So if you guys are not familiar with tier list making, that is basically S tier means like a perfect match, like A tier is like pretty, like very good except maybe one thing, B tier is like above average, C tier is average, D tier, so on and so forth. And right now, I kind of just rank this based off, okay, these teams do not need Sean Payton because there's no head coaching kind of opportunities, because we know that San Francisco is obviously not going to get rid of Kyle Shanahan, and there's nothing about like KOC or like Brian Dable either. So these teams are not really part of this. But however, these teams on the bottom, there's been rumors that Sean Payton wants to go there, that he likes one of their players or whatnot, or he's done interviews with them. So we'll be talking about that today. So the first team I kind of want to talk about would be the Chargers. And from what I've heard about everything, Dean Spanos has said that, oh, well, I don't want to get rid of Brandon Staley. But I've heard that Sean Payton would want to go there. He has a house in Los Angeles. But because of that, I think people would be commenting if I just left them at does not need Sean tier list. So what I'll do is I'll put them in. I feel they would be an S tier team if they were in the hunt for that, just because the way I kind of think about it would be, if they didn't have Brandon Staley, if they had a better coach, especially in the second half of that game against the Jaguars, they probably win that game. They don't blow that lead at all. As a matter of fact, with Sean Payton and Justin Herbert's development gets better, he play a lot more to Herbert's strengths, and it'd be a lot better of a system with Sean Payton there rather than Brandon Staley. However, and then also Joe Lombardi, he got fired too, but I still think Staley, especially some of his time management, some of his kind of challenges on all that stuff, a little iffy, especially throughout the season and last season, especially when he called that time against the Raiders. That's why if Sean Payton did and the Chargers were in the market for each other, I think it'd be an S tier mark. But because I know that obviously they're not looking for a new head coach, at least that's what they're saying, I was kind of leave them up there. But just keep in mind, if they did, they'd be an S tier. So the next team I have would be the Carolina Panthers. And this one's kind of a tough one to kind of put in a tier, just because the Panthers have been one of those teams for a while. They have a pretty decent O-line, not the best in the world. They can still get a little bit more improvement. They have a really solid defense. They have D Horn. So they have, and they also have Brian Burns, of course. So they have players on their defensive side. The only main thing that would kind of hold the Panthers' job a little bit back from being kind of one of these higher tiers would just be that there's not really any confirmation what's going on at quarterback. I'm not sure if I don't really hear anything about them trading up. Also, I'm not really sure if they're going to stick with Sam Darnold or Matt Corral, because he was supposed to play last year. He had that Liz Frank injury, so he was out for the whole entirety of that year. So that could be a thing where he might want to play around with Matt Corral before they draft or get someone else, because I'm not really sure about the quarterback position. I'd put them in a B tier just because they still have a really solid roster. Other than that, we have the Denver Broncos job, and this is a really good job. Obviously, the only thing will just be kind of some of the uncertainty of Russell Wilson. Just, they have a really good defense. They have a lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. They have good wide receivers. They have KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, and all those guys over there as well. So it's not too bad. It's just obviously there's a whole thing of Russell Wilson. Is he truly washed? Is he done? Is he gonna just kind of decline, or was it just kind of how bad Nathaniel Hackett was? So that's like the main thing that would kind of impede Sean Payton's progress at this job or going to this the Denver Broncos position. But the thing that makes the Denver Broncos position really good, I think an S tier position would also be the Wallen family is some of the richest owners, if not the richest owners in American sports. So he's looking at a $20 to $25 million per year kind of contract. They'd be able to probably pay that and probably some more. So I think they're an S tier just because, maybe not S tier, I think A tier just because there's this uncertainty of working for an older quarterback who's looking obviously kind of washed. You're not really sure if he can really kind of get back to his old form, because at least for a younger QB, they can develop him, kind of coach him out things. With older quarterbacks, older players in general, that can be a little bit more difficult. So that's why I'm gonna put them at S tier, because at least at with the Chargers they have Justin Herbert, who's a young stud, and Russell Wilson not so much. So that's why I'll put them on A tier. But there's still a really good coaching vacancy for Sean Payton to go to. So next team up, we have the Arizona Cardinals. They fired their coach, Cliff Kingsbury, not too long ago. Steve Keim was also out. They hired a new GM. So the main thing with the Cardinals job is that we really don't know what's happening at all, just because new GM, new regime, basically. Bidwell was tired of what was going on with Keim and Cliff. So he got rid of those two. So now we have a new GM in the house. So the main thing would be, from what I can tell, there's a lot of rumors kind of that, well, the new GM is going to trade DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to kind of unload some of the bigger contracts and kind of maybe do a little bit of a retooling. Not, I haven't heard anything about like an outright rebuild, but it seems that a lot of the players are unhappy there. They don't want to be there, especially DeAndre Hopkins, who's one of their best players. And then I know JJ Watt's retiring, so they're going to lose some talent for sure. So that's why I'm not sure where to put them, is because the thing about the Cardinals is that they also have Kyler Murray, who's obviously a very talented QB. He has a lot of upside. He's worked with shorter quarterbacks before. He really helped Drew Brees from when he was with the San Diego Chargers back in the day. When he came to Neola, he turned them around. Hall of Fame quarterback when he was coaching him. So I'm not saying he'll do the exact same with Kyler Murray if he does go to Arizona, but he has said he wants to work with Kyler Murray, so that's kind of another thing that you want to keep in mind with the Cardinals job. But the main thing with the Cardinals also, are they going to have a lot of their weapons? They're going to have as much talent, but because they're not absolutely going to get rid of Kyler Murray, obviously, and then who knows what they'll do in the draft. They can get some couple great players because they have some high draft picks. I'm gonna put them in C tier just because it's not as good as like a Broncos job, or if the Chargers job was still up for grabs, but it's not kind of as chaotic as the Panthers job either. So or it's a little bit more chaotic just because obviously new regime, new changes, new people. A lot of the old players are probably gonna get shipped out. So who really knows with that? If this was a little bit later where we knew kind of where the Cardinals stands on contracts, on free agents and all that, I'd probably be able to move them up a little bit, just because right now I'm really just not certain of that. I'll put them in C tier. I think it's pretty fair because obviously I have Kyler Murray, but other than that, I'm not really sure what would be kind of the incentive for Sean Payton to move there. So kind of moving on to a new team, you have the Houston Texans. And so the reason why I kind of have the Texans, well, not kind of, well, the reason why I have the Texans super low on this is literally just because I think the Houston Texans organization, it has to be one of the most dysfunctional, chaotic. There's just so much drama, scandals, allegations, especially with the McNair family. There is so much chaos going on right now. I don't know why he'd want to go there, just because people are going to be kind of telling me, well, they have the top 2 pick, so that means they're going to get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, depending on how things kind of play out. Depends on if the Bears trade down or if they pick someone. Who knows what's going on with that? But my main point is that if you can kind of go between the Denver Broncos, who their owners are rich, going to pay a lot of money, the Panthers, they're not really sure what's going on with their QB, but hey, at least they have a pretty talented roster. Other than that, they have players, of course. Same thing with the Cardinals. They have a QB. Other than that, not really too sure, but at least they have a new ownership. They have not new ownership, but their ownership has new brass in town with a new GM. Same thing kind of goes with it's going to probably happen soon with maybe the Panthers as well, depending on how things go. So the main thing would just be, at least these guys, even if they had bad seasons, obviously, they're going to have changes. They're going to have new guys kind of coming in. So at least there, if he joins those organizations, he kind of knows at least, well, I'm going to be part of something new, something probably fresh. I can help kind of rebuild it. The Texans, it's this time and time again, whether a head coach like Bill O'Brien trades DeAndre Hopkins for nothing, or they're just hiring head coaches just so they can be tank commanders and then get rid of them after just 1 year. See basically what happened with Lovie Smith and Romeo Crennel. So there's kind of a lot of stuff with that. There's a lot of drama with the Texans of how they treated some of the Deshaun Watson stuff. And there's just, other than maybe the second overall pick, there's really, if Sean Payton does go there this year, it would really have to be a complete deep, I know it would be another rebuilding season. And with Sean Payton, of course, if he can turn around Russell Wilson or get that the LA job especially, or even maybe develop one of the Panthers QBs, these teams at least have enough talent to be able to compete in the playoffs, how the Chargers made the playoffs. And if Russell Wilson played good, if he scored like 17 points in a lot of the games of how good the defense was playing, they would be in the playoffs too. So if you're Sean Payton, why would you want to go to the Texans job where it's a complete, right now there's a couple good players or a couple players who had relatively decent seasons, but who knows, that's just because they just got those opportunities based on how there was so little talent. So who really knows with that? Why would you want to go to this job where you really will have to start from basically a one kind of obviously top 2 QB, and then from the draft, then you have to get more and more pieces. This can take, this will, if the Texans do rebuild successfully, it's gonna take a lot longer. And with how meddling the owners are, with how kind of bad their ownership group is, I highly doubt Sean Payton will take that job. Well, I know that he's interviewed, but I highly doubt he'd want to kind of take that job, especially if the Broncos job was on the line. And because of that, that's why I think they're just kind of completely bottom tier their own. But next we have their rival in the AFC South, the Indianapolis Colts. And this job is, I'm not really sure how to think about this, because the Colts have been kind of in a no man's land of they kind of sneak in the playoffs sometimes, or they'll kind of just miss, except last year where they completely bottomed out. Well, they'll have like a run of QB, they'll get like a Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, and they'll be able to, they have a good enough roster around them so they won't completely lose out games until at least last year, where a lot of things just kind of fell apart for them. But before that, they had at least a decent they had a pretty good defense, a pretty good O-line. So the main thing with a pretty decent running game, of course, not really any receiving weapons or obviously a QB either. But the main thing with the Colts would just be, are they actually gonna rebuild this year? Are they actually gonna take a QB like a Will Levis kind of guy in the draft? Just kind of throw out some young guys, see what they can do, instead of just, hopefully they can get like an older QB like a Derek Carr, probably in this case. Hopefully they can be able to win some games, be able to go in the playoffs as like a 6 seed, 7 seed. Is that what they want to do, or are they going to try, especially their ownership with how meddling Ballard is? Is he going to want to say, well, I'm tired of just being kind of like a middling team. I just want to actually rebuild, get some young pieces, get some draft picks, and then be able to develop them, of course, and then be able to have a culture built actually within from the Colts from the ground up, rather than just be importing guys every year. So because of that, I think this is kind of just a D tier, just because he's interviewed with them. But the main thing would obviously just kind of be, who knows if they're going to get another veteran QB, how that's going to go, of course. If they do get another veteran QB, who really knows what the Colts are heading to? And then they need a lot of kind of retooling, just because last year they had a lot of injuries, of course, but even still there was a lot of kind of bad decisions, especially they really don't really sign any like great wide receivers to help out the QB. They had a couple tight ends who were playing pretty decently, and then who knows what's going on with Jonathan Taylor's health. Is he going to come back fully healthy? Because we've seen this where sometimes when a running back gets hurt once, they kind of just get hurt for a lot of times throughout the rest of their career. And the thing with the Indianapolis Colts is just, normally if this was any other offseason, it might not be the worst job, just because they still have some pieces, especially if they do return healthy, as I mentioned before. But the main thing is, compared to like a Broncos job, compared to what the Broncos kind of have, what they'd be willing to pay Sean Payton, why would you want to go to the Colts job instead of the Broncos job? The Broncos job just has way more talent across the board, so that's why kind of, especially compared to some of the other jobs, I think the Colts job is kind of below average. And of course, last but not least, we have the Saints. I have heard rumors that he'd be willing to kind of come back to the Saints, depending on how a few things go. And I think it's going to be the same thing with the Colts. They're both kind of in a D tier kind of deal where a lot of their best players are really kind of starting to age out, especially guys like Cameron Jordan. A lot of guys kind of had what do you say? This kind of under the radar seasons because it was a lot of I want to say it's kind of harder to gauge the Saints is because there was so much injuries, part because all their players are older. Think about also guys like Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas not in the old, but there's just been a lot of injuries that have hit them. Marcus Lattimore was injured for the majority of the year as well. I know Pete Werner, one of their best linebackers, injured too. Jameis Winston injured, then he got benched, and that's something they never really talked about. And last year actually 2 years ago now, time flies, when Sean Payton and Jameis Winston were in their first year without Drew Brees, Jameis Winston was looking pretty alright, pretty solid. Then, of course, Jameis Winston hurt his knee, out for the rest of the year, and then everything just kind of went downhill for the Saints there. They still had a winning record with guys like Ian Book, for example. So Sean Payton can still coach his ass off. The last year he was actually coaching, but the main thing is, as I mentioned before, the Saints they don't own their first round pick. That goes to Philly. Who knows what's going on with their QB situation as well. And a lot of their guys are going to be aging out. They've been injury prone. But same thing with the Colts kind of job. It would be cool to see him come back to obviously the team he won a Super Bowl with. But when you look at, especially if they do change their mind on Brandon Staley, a Broncos job, or maybe even like a Panthers job, I don't think the Saints job holds as much weight. And one last thing before I kind of go and kind of leave you guys, just also with the Panthers job. Only another thing that would kind of brings it down is just because the Saints do ultimately at the end of the day control where Sean Payton goes, because they're the ones who they're going to be getting draft compensation, which according to him, when he was on the Colin Cowherd show, it's going to be basically kind of like a mid, like later first round pick. That's kind of what they're eyeing. So I highly doubt that he would go to Carolina, just based on also the Saints can just say, well, because you're a division opponent, it'll be 2 first rounders and maybe like a 5th or 6th or whatever they want, because they can, at the end of the day, they control his destiny. I don't want to put too much draft kind of capital into this, just because obviously that would kind of mess up a lot of things, but just because I highly doubt the Cardinals would want to trade away a top 5 pick for Sean Payton. Sean Payton's a great head coach, but top 5 pick, not really sure about that. Same thing with Colts. They have like a top 6, 7 pick. I'm not sure why they would want to trade. The Broncos would probably be a lot more willing to. And if the what Sean Payton has been saying is true about them trading kind of like a later first round pick, they have San Francisco's first round pick, which could be possibly a number like 29 to 32, depending on how obviously good we do. So that can, like, if that's the case, they'd obviously just want to trade that to the Saints, get Sean Payton, hopefully help kind of Russell Wilson turn that around. But that's kind of all I have for you guys today, just because, as I mentioned before, just want to do a little bit more of like a tier list video, something a little bit more, obviously not a short video, but obviously not a full-length podcast. Just kind of want to talk about what I think about the different vacancies that Sean Payton has been linked with. If you'd like more of this style of content, please feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Leave a like, make sure to subscribe. I'll talk to you guys next time.